Hey, I'm Leo, and a big welcome to The Sound Museum, the music podcast that explores that personal connection. In this very special bonus episode of The Sound Museum, this is my 2013 interview with the late, great Irene Cara. Now, this interview is very special to me. It was my first time chatting with Irene, and my co-host Jono and I had a great time chatting with Irene. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favourite podcast provider. By subscribing, it ensures that you don't miss any future episodes, and it helps the show grow and reach more people. I hope you enjoy this throwback podcast. My next guest this morning is a singer, songwriter, producer, actress and dancer. Over the years, she's set the charts alight worldwide with hits such as Fame, What a Feeling and Why Me. She is an Oscar, Grammy and Golden Globe winner, the fabulous Irene Cara.
Hello, nice to be here. Nice to be with all your listeners.
You grew up in the Bronx in New York. You spoke a mixture of English and Spanish at home. You played the piano from age 3 and recorded your first album in Spanish when you were just 8. What were your early influences growing up?
Well, I worked with so many terrific people. Once I got settled into the American field of the entertainment industry, I started in the Spanish field. My dad was a musician in a Latin mambo band, and I used to, dance around, as a child in Carmen Miranda outfits. And dance in front of the stage, in front of his orchestra at the Broadway Casino. So I was already doing nightclubs at 6, 7, and 8 years old, which I think is hilarious in New York. But by the time I got into the Electro Company and with Bill Cosby and Rita Moreno and of course now the very famous Morgan Freeman, who was not famous at all when I worked with him as a child, I had settled into the American field and was very fortunate to work with all kinds of brilliant actors as well as musicians. Actors, I don't know where to begin. Well, we could begin with Bill Cosby, Rita Moreno, James Earl Jones, George Stanford Brown, LeVar Burton, Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, just a plethora of terrific people. As a musician, I worked with the late Luther Vandross before he was famous, when he was still a backup vocalist for David Bowie and Bette Midler. In fact, I'm the one who hired him to sing so loud in the choruses of Fame, the record. And I knew the Average White Band when they first came to New York. George Duke, who recently passed away. A lot of my friends have passed on, unfortunately, and it makes you feel your mortality when you hear another friend has died, and I've lost quite a few in the last 5 years especially.
You were doing a lot of singing, but you're also doing a lot of acting. Did you prefer one to the other, the singing or the acting?
Well, because I started in musical theater, working with Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy, and working off-Broadway with some terrific people as well, I never really kind of separated them as one or the other. It was all performing for me, whether I was acting or singing. It was all part of the same energy. I never really made a distinction of that. I'm a musical actress, I'm a musician actress, and there are a lot of those now. But, a lot of them come from theater. Irene,
you appeared in a movie called Sparkle in the late 70s and the acclaimed miniseries Roots in the 80s as well. You took a role in the movie which would ultimately change your life, which is, of course, Fame. You were cast as Coco in the movie. It was based upon students at the Performing Arts School in New York, combining singing, dancing and acting. Looking back, what first attracted you to the role, and did you have much say in the music in the film?
I did have quite a bit of influence on the music. I didn't get much credit for it, but, I did write Hot Lunch. I never got writing credit for it. Michael Gore came to me with a bass line, and I wrote everything else. That was a little disappointing that they only gave me arrangement credit because, that was money that they didn't pay me. But it was worth it, because just being in the movie, catapulted me as an international artist on an international stage. And everything I'd done before that really hadn't done that in the same way. So, you take a little bit of the bitter with the sweet. Also, I had a lot to do with hiring the background vocalists for Fame, like people like Luther Vandross and Vicky Sue Robinson, who's had a huge dance hit with "Turn the Beat Around" around that time, and a lot of the singers from Chic and Change, and people who sang with on all the Nile Rodgers records. I hired all those people for Michael Gore to give that big choral sound in Fame. I brought that to the film.
Fame personally means so much to me. You've got no idea. It was the very first record I ever bought. I was 6 years old at the time. And I remember being totally spellbound.
Aren't you?
I remember being totally spellbound, Irene, with the dancing on the car scene. And I have to say, I had a huge crush. Well, at that time, I didn't know it was a crush, but I was quite fascinated by the late Gene Anthony Ray, who played Leroy in the movie and the TV show. I really wanted to go to that school as well.
Yeah, Gene was the youngest of the bunch. He was just 16. He was the wild child of the group, and he was just brilliant. And he was very much. There was very much a lot about Gene that was Leroy. He was tailor-made to play Leroy because he was in so many ways, Leroy, that character.
In the Oscars, for example, you sang Fame and Out Here on My Own on the same night, and that was the very first time an artist had ever performed two songs from a movie. What do you remember most from that night? That was an incredible night for you.
The medley they put together. They did a very nice job of putting together a medley and a storyline of me coming out of a Rolls Royce, and in other words, the Academy people, production people, did a great job of doing a whole little theatrical number out of the medley, and I was very happy with what they did, and we performed it really well. I got to keep my outfit. Fiona Aldridge was the designer who was very prominent in the 80s, a very prominent clothing designer, and a Spanish lady. What else? Oh, just the whole thing. The whole thing was like surreal.
Sometimes I wonder where I've been, who I am, do I fit in? I may not win, but I can't be thrown.
The track that everybody knows you for, of course, is Flashdance, What a Feeling. What was the inspiration behind that song? And tell us a little bit about the writing process for that one.
Well, they showed us the last scene in the film, me and Keith Forsey. They wanted me to sing it, and they wanted, Georgia was doing most of the music for the soundtrack, so was Phil Ramone. And I said, well, look, I'm not in this movie. If you want me to sing it, you're basically playing me a bunch of chords, you haven't finished writing this. I would like to, write it if I'm going to sing it. And so they agreed to that, and they showed us the last film of the last scene in the film, and Keith and I watched it. We hadn't seen anything else of the movie. We got in a taxi to go back to Giorgio's studio, and by the time we arrived, it was written, we basically wrote it in the car.
I mean, it's such a wonderful song, and you wrote the song, and you touched on it before because you actually won a whole swag of awards for What a Feeling. You won 2 Grammys, and as a songwriter, you won an Oscar for Best Original Song. Singing the song these days, does it have a different meaning to you? Because it means so much to so many people, that song.
Well, I figured I needed to make the song be a metaphor for the entire movie. And since the movie was about dance, I basically used that premise of making someone's devotion to dance be someone's motivation for their devotion to life in general. And that was something, obviously, that I'd been familiar with because that was my life story at that time. Even though I didn't have a clue what the hell the rest of the movie was about, I just focused on that premise and putting that thought into a lyric, into the song, into the melody.
The album What a Feeling in 1983 featured the singles Why Me, I Dream and Breakdance. Now, that was a dance craze in the early 80s. Now, I remember trying to breakdance as a kid with some terrible results. Did you ever try and learn breakdancing back in the day, Irene?
No, I was there at the inception. I mean, that was the beginning of hip-hop.
It was, yeah.
And it really was invented in New York City, where I was from originally, the Bronx. I would, run down my stoop, and see kids on, just dancing and twirling on their heads, on cardboard, sheets of cardboard. It really started, in that area. By the time it went across the country and got to, to become an LA thing, it had gotten very negative and very misogynistic and very vulgar, and it became, gangster rap. But originally, it really was a form of protest. It was about social conscience. It was about taking one's frustration and anger of being poor and being marginalized because of race or because of poverty, and turning that into something that you can get off your chest, so to speak, with your body. That's what breakdancing was about, and that was the inception of hip-hop, the original inception of hip-hop. If you go and listen to all the original great hip-hop artists, Grandmaster Flash, DMX, they were all very political and very socially conscious. And then, of course, they were all about dance and let's have a good time. But, they weren't negative at that time.
Now, the music industry back then was a lot different to what it is now, and you got burnt rather badly by a former record label. How do you look back on that period? How did that change your career?
Well, it changed me as a person. I had been everybody's child for so long. My mother's child, my manager's child, my agent's child. I was everybody's freaking kid, And when this happened to me, I realized that no one was going to defend me like myself. And it was a time for me to wake up and smell the coffee and really grow up and become a woman, which I did. And I'm very happy I did, because whatever it cost me, it was a fight that I won, and it was something that I had to do to secure my future, my financial stability. And I did that. And I'm very happy I did that, because I have a brand now, and I, have 3 homes, and I make a very nice upper middle class lifestyle. I don't need to live in mansions. I live amongst wonderful communities here in Florida, in New Mexico, and in Hawaii. If I hadn't fought the way I did in my 20s, I would have had nothing. They would have gotten away with stealing everything from me, not just my career, but all of my money. And so it was a wake-up period to learn how to protect myself. That mothers and managers and agents and all kinds of mother figures that were ruling and controlling my life since I could walk were not going to be around to protect me for the rest of my life, and neither boyfriends or husbands. It was the kind of lesson, I guess, that I needed to have, no matter how difficult it was, so that I could grow up, and that's a blessing for me.
It's really great for me to be here. I won over the pain and the fear. It's been so very hard through the years. Been looking through a rainbow of tears, and still I never really let go of that dream. It's really great for me to be here. I won over the pain and the fear. It's been so very hard through the years. Been looking through a
In the early 90s, you actually formed a hot woman band called Hot Cowmel. Now, tell us briefly on the background of forming Hot Cowmel and what's it all about.
Well, this is the band that I'll be touring with in November, and I'm very excited to present them to Australian audiences. But they're the kind of female artists that don't get the kind of attention they should in this industry. It's, too much of it is superfluous and smoke and mirrors and not the real thing. These girls are brilliant musicians as they are singers. And that's what I wanted. That's the kind of statement I wanted to make with this record. That women, especially women of color, could be, beautiful and great singers, but can actually play and write and sing their own music. And that's what we'll be doing during our tour in Australia.
What sort of songs and music can people expect from Hot Caramel?
Well, it's grown-up stuff. I mean, there's some dance, some of it is, pop, but it's still on a very adult contemporary level. There's a lot of jazz, which we're not doing too much of, but we're doing some of. It's a double CD set, so it's really 2 CDs in one. That's why it took so long for me to finish it, because it was an independent project that I was financing myself, and it was 2 albums. So we're doing some of the first volume, which is more of the commercial pop stuff, and then we're doing some of the second volume, which is, more heavy-duty jazz, acid jazz kind of stuff.
Now, Ivan, you were last in Australia in 2006 when you performed What a Feeling at the AFL Grand Final here in Melbourne.
Great time. It was just a ball. The people were wonderful to me, and I just adored, Australia. And I made a wonderful friend who plays with Yanni, an Aboriginal musician named David Hudson. If he's listening, hi, David, I'm coming. I hope I can see you soon. And after my show, I hung out with him and his family. He introduced me to his producers and his family, and he had a theater group there in Queensland. And I hung out on the beach, and he would take me around the town, at night, and it was great fun.
Irene, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me, fellas, and I look forward to meeting you. You come backstage, all right?
We will do. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Irene. I hope you enjoyed that special bonus episode of The Sound Museum, my 2013 interview with the late Irene Cara. Make sure you follow the show on social media. Just search for Sound Museum AU on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Also check the show notes with this podcast for the link to the YouTube playlist and the special Spotify playlist for my tribute to Irene. I hope you can join me on the next episode of The Sound Museum. Until then, Have a great week and take care.